call to order the regular meeting of the Ferguson Township Board of Supervisors for May 4th. I would ask Dave Probolka to go over the meeting guidelines in case there's anybody listening in or watching that hasn't been with us before. So.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you everybody for joining us again via Zoom for a virtual Board of Supervisors regular meeting. Just a couple of protocol-related items to review, and then I'll take a roll call of the elected officials that are on the line. This meeting's been advertised as a virtual meeting via Center Daily Times and through our other media outlets, meaning that it is entirely being conducted in the Zoom environment or by conference call. Our conference bridge is also open for the public to join and to attend. People that are watching at home or that are part of this call can engage in the same way that you would at a public meeting. Just ask that you look to the chair to acknowledge you during the public comment period, and treat this meeting venue in the same manner that you would if you were here with me in the main meeting room. Just a couple of things to review on, logistically. We do want to track anybody in the audience who's here to speak about a particular item, or if you're just here to observe. And one of the ways that I think we've found to be effective to track that, it's kind of a virtual sign-in sheet using the chat feature at the bottom of the screen. So there's the little dialog box that says chat below it. If you're here to speak about an issue, or even if you're just here and you're not a board member or a member of our authorities, boards, or commissions that came here to deliver a report, or a staff member, I just ask that you type your name into the group chat. Jeremy knows the score. He's already typed his name in there, and your municipality of residence or your neighborhood where you live. And then if you are here to speak about a specific item, if you could just type in what that item is so that we know when that item comes up for discussion, that the chair can acknowledge you for your question or comment. Because this is a virtual meeting, one of the requirements under state statute is that I take a roll call of the Board of Supervisors that are on the line and confirm that they can all hear each other and that they can also engage and speak. So when I say your name, please just say here, present, or make some kind of a sound acknowledging you're here. Mr. Miller?
Here.
Ms. Danini?
Here.
Ms. Strickland?
Here.
Mr. Mitra?
Here.
Ms. Stevens?
Here.
And Mr. Chairman, we have a quorum, and I'll turn it back over to you.
Okay. First item on the agenda is citizens input for anything that is not on the agenda already. If anyone has anything to address the board? I don't know. Do we have anyone on the phone connection or?
Nope, I got hold music.
Okay, so it's just the people we see then. Okay, seeing no request to make a comment, we'll go on to the approval of the minutes for the April 20th regular meeting.
Motion to approve with, this is Laura. Motion to approve with one small correction, please. Let's see here. On page 2, there's a place where I made a motion to amend the original motion that the board reserves the right at any time to require sidewalks. Could we note that that motion was about noting on the plan that we reserve the right at any time to require sidewalks?
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think we can make that just part of the regular motion. So,
Great. So be it.
do we have a second?
A second.
Okay. The second by Lisa. A motion and a second to approve as amended. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Playing with my two computers here, so Next item is under special reports. That would be a report from the manager on items related to the COVID-19 response.
Thank you. There have been several significant updates since the last time I've been able to address the board and the viewing public to both our local and regional response efforts to the COVID-19 pandemic. First, today marks the beginning of the reconstitution of full township operations. The road crew began reporting back to the office and commenced the first of 2 rounds of brush and leaf collection for the month of May. Additional protocol has been implemented to ensure the safety of our road workers, including staggering start times, revised vehicle and equipment assignments, social distancing measures, and additional personal protective equipment. Office staff also began reporting back to the office today, and I have approved temporary remote work assignments for staff to reflect a weekly rotation of in-office and remote work. This has enabled us to structure our office to eliminate close gatherings and provide adequate distancing opportunities. Beyond that, all staff are required to wear masks when not confined in their office space and will avoid congregating in employee gathering spaces. The office building will remain closed to the public until further notice, and residents are encouraged to make use of the deposit box located next to the main entrance doors to drop off tax payments and other critical documents. Regionally, efforts have been undertaken to develop a standard set of protocols and restrictions for residential and commercial construction activities, which were permitted to resume as of last Friday, May 1st. A communication to contractors and the media describing the protocol in place will be forthcoming and will include requirements that contractors provide their COVID-19 response plans or safety plans and contact information for their designated pandemic response officer to the Center Region Code Administration and the host municipality. Local police departments will work in concert with the Codes Office for enforcement of any observed violations. Lastly, the Regional Emergency Operations Center continues its Level 2 virtual activation, and meetings are now held twice per week with members from various governmental organizations, school districts, utilities, and first responders. As many of you know, Center County will reopen in the yellow category of the Governor's Recovery Plan on Friday, May 8th. This means that some restrictions on social and business activity will be lifted while others will remain in place. All approved activity will continue to require appropriate social distancing measures and personal protective equipment. Messaging continues to be distributed via various media outlets through the Center Region Public Information Officer, Amy Farkas. Those watching at home or on CNET are encouraged to follow the Center Region Ready Facebook page for the most current information on regional response efforts. You can also visit the township's website or the website for the Borough of State College for the latest news for both local and regional response efforts. Just before I respond to any questions, I'd like to finish by again thanking residents and business owners in the township for your patience and understanding as we move forward with the recovery from the COVID-19 pandemic. I understand that not having access to the same level of service delivery we've all come to expect in Ferguson Township over the last several months has been an inconvenience, and I'm grateful for the resilience and positive reaction from the community. And furthermore, on behalf of the police department, I'd like to thank everybody for their concern expressed for the health and well-being of our officers and emergency responders. As we move ahead into the coming weeks and months, I'll continue to monitor the status of the pandemic and reopen the building to public access at the appropriate time. In the interim, staff will continue to be responsive through phone and email communications. That concludes my report. I'll be happy to respond to any questions. Thank you.
Does anyone have any questions for Dave? Lisa.
I didn't really have any questions. I just wanted to echo your plug for Amy Farkas's messages through Center Region Ready. They are really well done and informative, and thanks to her for voicing those and for all of you for working together to put those together. They've really been helpful.
Anything else? Okay, seeing none, we'll go to the next item is the Center Region's Park and Rec Authority report from Bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to the Board of Supervisors. The whole recreation and parks industry is one of those that has faced mixed messages because people want to be out, but they shouldn't be out. But and so consequently, the Parks and Recreation Department has also a startup kind of procedure. And I do want to mention to you some of the protocols that will be in place here in the coming few weeks. Our facilities the parks have always been open. We haven't closed any parks in the region. However, some of the facilities within the parks have not been accessible. And our facilities will remain closed during the governor's yellow status. Playgrounds will remain closed. Borough basketball courts will remain closed. No organized group activity will be allowed in the parks, but family and friends can gather for activity of under 25 people, as long as it's not an organized sport or organized special event, organized tournament. COG will be discussing on Wednesday, enacting a full yellow status plan submitted to the COG last week. And we'll get an update on COG's action when they meet. We are continuing to review the financial impact of the shutdown and the reopening. And there may be some additional budget cuts. This is a fluid issue. We don't know exact figures yet. We don't know exact direction with regard to this, but I wanted the supervisors to know that that we were monitoring the financial side of this process as well as the programmatic side of the process. All sports leagues, tournaments are canceled through June 30th. So that we won't be starting up softball leagues before June 30th. Other facility rentals in terms of formally renting a facility through the Park and Recreation Department, that will not be allowed prior to June 30. We'll have to reassess that as we get closer to June 30, based on whatever the status is of the governor's reopening plan. But programmatically, we're looking at not running any programs until we attain the green status according to the governor's plan. We're not exactly sure what that timing is going to be. I will tell you that we have rentals for special events and for tournaments and camps on the books for July 1. And our intent is to hopefully have those go on, but none are guaranteed unless we're in the green category. And we're also working on what precautions, if we are in the green category, what precautions we may have to attach to those different activities just to maintain health and safety of the participants. The pools will not open until green status has been achieved, and only if it's financially feasible. There is a kind of a line in terms of opening the pools when it is not going to impact on when it is going to impact on the financial status of the pools and their operation. Certainly, we are not intending to go into a deficit income issue with regard to that. The senior center, or what is known as the active adult center, will not open until green status is achieved. And even then, we're talking about, and there is some concern about how we're going to operate the active adult center, even when the green status is achieved by the here in the state. Also, I have had some questions about restrooms in the parks. And all restroom buildings where the park has a building for a restroom will open on May 11th. Porta-johns have been delivered already to the parks that do not have restroom facilities. And restrooms at Millbrook Marsh Nature Center will reopen on the 11th as well. Water fountains at the parks. For the safety of our residents, water fountains in all parks will remain closed until we reach green status. Water fountains will not be active and will be bagged and signed as closed. The last thing I want to mention is playgrounds. During the yellow status, all playgrounds in the Center Region parks and on the State College Area School District facilities will remain closed for the safety of patrons. Playgrounds will not open until Center County reaches the green status. So at the moment, that's kind of a thumbnail sketch of the plan that we have moving forward for the next, say, 30 days, recognizing that this whole reopening process is a fluid situation and there are just many, many players. If you have any questions, you can ask. I'll try and answer them.
Anyone have any questions for Bill? Lisa?
Thanks, Bill. That was a thorough report, and I think some of that information just came out this afternoon about the parks opening, so I appreciate you being way up to speed on that. I just wanted to make sure we were really clear. So are camps only opening in the green phase?
That's correct.
Okay.
Camp at the moment, we've got to achieve the green status for camps to be open.
Okay.
I that there has been a fair amount of discussion with staff with regard to camps, and even if it is in the green phase, there may be some modifications to certain camps that are going to occur just because of the nature of the camp itself and trying to protect the young folk that are involved with them. But right now, the earliest will be when we achieve green status.
And they're closed nevertheless through June 30th. Nothing would operate before July 1st.
That's correct.
Okay.
That's correct.
Okay. Is there any plan right now for hiring of summer staff, or is that just, I don't know, has any been done, or will that just be done really quickly if we can get things running in July, or what's the status of summer hiring?
Good question. I have a 6-page memo sitting in front of me to ask that question. and I'm not prepared to review that memo, but I am prepared to tell you that we are looking at phasing in our summer help and our summer staff. The maintenance part of the parks, they've been operating. I mean, we have to mow grass and we have to, clean some things up and do basic maintenance stuff just to keep the parks in usable shape. But we're talking about a staggered staff. And then we're also then talking about when we might have to bring on the additional part-time summer staff, and in what phase and what usage. It has taken up a great deal of time to try and figure some of that out. We're not just going to go and bring in everybody on the 11th because we're in yellow. We're going to be phasing staff in as we need it, primarily in the area of the staff that works on the caretaker staff that we have. And we have a fairly extensive plan for bringing them in. And I believe that is being shared with the COG here. If it hasn't been already, that it is being shared with them within the next week or two.
Okay. And just one final clarification. So basketball courts at the Center Region parks are opening, but not at borough parks.
That's correct. The borough status with regard to basketball courts at the moment is that they are not going to be available for use. However, the courts at the parks in other municipalities, as long as the participants are staying under the 25, and as long as they're going to be allowed to utilize those facilities. This is the same with the pavilions. We're not taking any residents for pavilions. However, the pavilions will be there. And on a drop-in basis, residents can, go into the pavilion and sit and have lunch, or, as long as they follow the yellow standards that have been established by the state. We're not going to prevent them, but it's on a drop-in basis. It's not on a scheduled or reserved basis.
All right. Thanks very much. And I know with the playgrounds, that's going to be a tough one. But I've been keeping up with some of the communications that have been coming out of parks. And I know that they're referencing as much public health information and state and federal guidelines on parks and rec management as they can. So, I'm certain that they're just using their best judgment in that.
The biggest challenge there, or one of the big challenges there, is the whole sanitation issue.
Yeah.
The sanitizing of the surfaces.
Right.
And the frequency that would be necessary to sanitize those surfaces in the playgrounds if they would be open under these particular conditions. And we're just, none of the municipalities nor recreation department is in a position to sanitize at a pace that would be safe.
Yeah. Well, thanks so much. I appreciate you answering those questions.
Any other questions for Bill? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to the next item, which is Ferguson Township Tree Commission report. Scott's here to give us that. You're muted, Scott.
You'd think I would be old hand at this after doing meetings every day now. Thanks, Chairman Miller, and to the board. So my name is Scott Flume. On behalf of the Ferguson Township Tree Commission, we'll provide you here with a following update on the Tree Commission's plans for the calendar year 2020. This will be about 4 to 5 minutes. A brief recap for attendees not familiar with the Tree Commission. The Ferguson Township Tree Commission was established by ordinance on August 18th, 2014 to help township staff maintain and care for Ferguson Township's more than 4,500 trees, which include a variety of species, ages, and sizes. The commission works closely with the Director of Public Works and the Township Arborist. The 5 members of the Tree Commission are appointed to 4-year staggered terms. Responsibilities of the Tree Commission include submitting recommendations to Township staff and Board of Supervisors for 1, reviewing private and public land development plans, 2, tree preservation, planting, maintenance, and removal, 3, tree species for planting in public areas, 4, tree pest and disease control. 5, a community tree plan. 6, landscape design and other ordinances. 7, annual budget and annual report. 8, conducting appeals and hearings. And 9, facilitating public education efforts. The Ferguson Township Tree Commission identified the following 5 goals for the 2017-2022 timeframe. 1, maintain Tree City USA designation. 2, develop a tree maintenance plan. 3, increase canopy coverage. 4, increase species diversity. 5, conduct education and outreach. For the year 2020, the Commission will focus on the following tasks in support of the Public Works Director and Arborist goals. 1, maintaining Ferguson's Township's Tree City designation that has been completed for 2020 by the Arborist. Specifically, this designation requires the following criteria be met. Spend a minimum of $2 per capita on a tree program, have a street tree ordinance, have a tree commission, and observe Arbor Day. And I'll briefly talk about Arbor Day here in a little bit later. Number 2, develop a tree maintenance plan that has been completed also by the Arborist. Additionally, the Tree Commission thanks the Ferguson Township Board of Supervisors and Township staff for their proactive support in addressing tree disease and pest issues in the last few years. Oak wilt, emerald ash borer are to name 2. Spotter and lanternfly is a current threat. The Tree Commission will support the Arborist and Township by offering contingency options to minimize the harm this pest presents to forest ecosystems, commercial and residential interests based on latest research. Additionally, the Arborist is addressing species diversity by revising the Township plant list in Resolution 1999-36. This will provide landscape guidance for conversion of future township land to residential and commercial usage. To clarify, this list does not restrict township private residents in their landscape decisions. However, for education resource purposes, this list will be made available to the public on the Tree Commission webpage. Number 3, the Arborist has a plan to increase canopy coverage in 2020. Estimated 100 trees will be planted in 2020 to the extent possible pending public health considerations with the coronavirus. Bidding on the contract for tree canopy coverage survey using geographic information system methods has been completed by the Public Works Director, Arborist, and staff. The cost of this survey is $15,965. It will be presented to you for consideration here after, I think, my comments. The survey provides a baseline analysis of tree canopy change in the township using 2008 and 2018 imagery. Establishing quantitative baseline of canopy will enable planners to map spatial and time changes in canopy coverage across the township. The analysis will provide metrics for estimating stormwater planning, heat island effects, and carbon sequestration capacity. This information will enable, this information will enable planners to define the scope of incentives involving trees, habitat, and ecosystem services infrastructure. If approved, the estimated time frame to completion is 4 months. Number 4, the Tree Commission intends to present a draft tree preservation, incentivization, and municipal ordinance plan to the Board of Supervisors for review by the 4th quarter of 2020. The goal is to encourage preservation and expansion of tree ecosystem services in future land use proposals. The Arborist is currently circulating a draft of the ordinance through township staff. Metrics, ordinances, and incentive policies are still being contemplated and revised. The Tree Commission seeks to emphasize preservation and expansion of tree ecosystem services by aligning incentives with Ferguson Township's zoning, public works, and engineering objectives. Number 5, conduct education and outreach. The Arborist and Tree Commission was going to host an Arbor Day event on May 2nd at Haymarket Park. The event has been canceled due to public health considerations. Preparation of 2 to 5 podcasts, each 5 minutes in duration, is still expected to be completed this year. Topics that this will address are the following: introducing residents to the arborist and how he, Lance King, serves township residents, introducing tree commission and its supporting role to the Public Works Department, and public and township roles to aid pest and disease response protocols. We'll also work on preparing a 1 to 2 page reference for new and existing homeowners outlining township arborist responsibilities and services, ecosystem services of trees for erosion control, stormwater runoff, heat mitigation, and habitat conservation. Disease awareness and prevention, no-mow, low-mow lawn options, and native plant versus invasive plant impacts. The tree commission, a tree commission representative will attend township open house and coffee hour events once they resume. On behalf of the tree commission, thank you for your service to the community, your recognition of the value of trees and ecosystem services to the township, and this opportunity to provide you and the residents an update on the commission's work. That's all I have.
Thanks, Scott. Does anyone have any questions for Scott? Laura?
Thanks, Steve. Hi, Scott. Thank you.
Hi there.
Hi. I was wondering, did the tree commission get a chance to review the Harner farm plan? And I'm sorry, it's not a trick question. I
No,
also
no.
can put it out to Dave Modricker.
No, this is, I think we got this, so this is in 2000, it was either December or January timeframe, and I looked it over. This is for the gas station plot, is that right?
Yes.
Because for that particular plot, we did look it over, we made recommendations, and we returned it. But Dave, I'm not sure if we've received an update, and maybe Dave can fill you in on what, if any, of the recommendations were adopted or taken up by the developer for that project.
Thank you. That'd be great. I probably should have asked it at the last meeting, but here we are.
Dave, do you by chance know if anything came back from that?
I don't have the particulars I can say in general, there's a subcommittee on the tree commission that has distributed the land development subdivision plans on the distribution list. We reviewed that couple meetings ago prior to, well, when we were still meeting in person. And so I think it's, I think Mark McDill's on the committee and Allison Muth at this point. We've had different people on the committee. Scott, I don't know if you're reviewing them actively now or not also.
So this one for the sheets, this is while Howard was still the chair. And
okay,
so
we had some turnover.
We reviewed this one at that time, but right since then, now it's Mark and Josh who are
Mark and Josh Potter. Okay, so I don't have, I'm sorry, I don't have the details on the Harner plan in terms of what they recommended and what was required. I don't know, Jenna turned her audio and sound or picture on, so she might have those details.
I don't have them on me, but I can have Christine follow up and let you all know what happened.
That'd be great. Thank you all for exploring that with me. It would be nice when our ABCs give recommendations that are specific like that, if they do get that feedback as to whether the developer adopted those recommendations. And I would love to know that. I don't know that I'll think to ask it every single time in every land development plan, but it would be great if it were just part of the process.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.
I do have one question for the Board of Supervisors. Let me bring it up here. So this came up when we were talking about the tree canopy survey, and so the question for the group is when the township authorities, boards, and commissions make any expenditure recommendations, are there any standard key information that points that the board would like to be provided in that discussion or that deliberation. And if there's a format for how the board would like that, for the ABCs to provide that information to you in. If you have that and you can pass that down to us, that'll be helpful. And then we can make sure that we format things in a way that kind of fits the template that you're looking to see information in.
Yeah, I think I'll actually turn that over to either Dave or Eric for a
Yeah,
comment.
I can answer that, Scott. The manager prepares the budget and presents it to the elected officials. So if there's a request that's coming from an authority board or commission for an expenditure for the upcoming fiscal year, that really ought to go through your staff liaison, and then it would come through my office. And I guess it all depends on what the specifics are in terms of what you're requesting. If it's, a general allocation, meaning, well, I'll use a tree commission example. Chambersburg Borough, their tree commission has an appropriation. It's a modest appropriation, but it's sort of a standing assistance to help private property owners plant trees via kind of like a micro grant program. Something like that is pretty general and probably doesn't require as much detail as if you are requesting a tree canopy survey, for example, in this case, where you want to, maybe have a defined general scope of work. Maybe it isn't, completely vetted to the point where it's ready to be put out on the street for proposals, but a good understanding of what your scope is and what your end in mind is, and how you, as the commission, believe that that particular expenditure is going to feed into policy recommendations to the Board of Supervisors, or for initiatives that, in this case, the tree commission is being asked to undertake. So, it's not really a question, I think, with one answer, but in general, if there is something that the tree commission is interested in putting forward, it ought to go through Dave Modricker as the staff liaison, and then it'll come in, through me as Eric and I put the budget requests together. And if it's a larger item, which, typical like consulting services and things like that, we would also want to give it consideration in the capital improvement program budget, which we actually will start planning for in probably, the end of this month, Eric, right? Guess we're already rolling into that.
Yeah, it's coming up fast.
So that gives us a 5-year projection and ability to kind of place some of the bigger expenditure items in an appropriate program year based on what available revenue and priorities of the Board of Supervisors. So,
okay,
kind of a broad answer, but not a question that really has one specific response to it.
No, that's fine. And Dave, everything that you said is what we have been doing right now. What had come up in our meeting is that there was some discussion of what is too much detail that we try to provide, and what becomes burdensome or too much to that's more than what's going to be needed to try to make a decision. And so it had come up in the meeting, does any other ABC authority, board, or commission follow a guideline or have in their bylaws something along the lines of that this is how they present cost expenditure information to the board? And basically what you said is what had come up. My thought is that, okay, for future, if there was something like a format that the board would like to see information in, that would help focus our discussion so that we kind of know, okay, this is the right level that we need to come in at to answer questions. Because it's to put it on, maybe in our case, it's Dave has to do the legwork to write up the justifications and for the expenditures. But maybe there's other questions that board members have that aren't necessarily going to be on the front of their mind, since they're not maybe thinking about tree planting things as much as maybe our group is. And so the point here for asking is if there was any key information that just kind of like it spanned over multiple ABCs, that we would use that and make sure that we try to format that in those questions and answer those in the future when we make any other recommendations for budget related issues.
There's no standard format or procedure in place for budgetary requests other than kind of what I outlined there a moment ago.
Okay, thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions? Laura?
Thank you, Steve. I don't have actually another question, but Scott, I just wanted to say thank you for serving. That was a great report. And thanks for everything you guys are doing, especially that education piece.
Oh, yeah. Looking forward to it. So thank you.
Sure.
Okay, so we'll move to the next item is the 2020 first quarter financial report. Just Eric.
Okay, I'm going to try to share my screen. Let me know if you can't not see this. I have to make this bigger. Why is it not doing that?
Eric, we're looking at your screensaver and a
Yes, I see that.
pop-up that says dash lane.
This is the intro to the board retreat.
Yes.
Oh, worked fine a minute ago.
Are you under like an extended projection with your screen, Eric, if you do like a function F8?
Oh, hang on, might be. Let me stop sharing, see what happens. What I will do is I'll move you guys over here. See if this works. And I'll minimize you. Your screen. There we go. I picked the wrong screen. How's that?
Good.
Okay.
Yep.
Now I gotta get mine up so I can see it. There we go. All right, well, this one's working like I thought it was. I did have a paper copy. So first quarter report, let me say that the finance department will be watching financial effects of the COVID-19 virus closely. It is anticipated the second quarter will show the reduction in tax revenue. The extent of the reduction is not yet known and will be monitored. Staff is on notice, excuse me, to monitor the effects, and the manager and I will meet regularly to plan for outcomes. Just a little background on our governmental fund breakdown. We have different fund groups. The general fund stands on its own. Then you got the capital funds, which make up ag preservation, capital reserve, regional capital recreation projects, transportation improvement fund, Prime Grove Mills, streetlight and park improvement fund. Then the special revenue funds are named such as because they generate money other than tax revenue, such as the streetlight fund, hydrant fund, and liquid fuels fund. And finally, the debt service account that we have. Some places have many of these. We just have the one. So when I look at the first thing I look at, and I think the most important thing for us to look at, is the cash balances trends. And I did a 3-year. I think 2 years probably too short. We could go longer, but I think 3 years is probably a good mix. So if you look at 2018, 2019, and 2020, you can see the general fund is going up slightly each year. Streetlight hydrant fund, you can tell that they're not a lot of money relative to the other funds. Then we get the general obligation account. That big spike is related to the bond proceeds that we received in 2019 it was. So the ending balance for 2020 was larger. And transportation improvement fund, that's the other next largest one, and that's starting to drop in value, partially because we're reducing the amount of money being transferred into it from the general fund. Liquid fuels and capital reserve, those are both in the roughly $1 million range. So all in all, the total looks a little, it doesn't look normal because the bond proceeds. You take the bond proceeds out, the between 2019 and 2020 cash balances are pretty much even. There's not a large gain there or a loss. So year-to-date amounts ended by fund group for March 31st. Looking at the different trends. If you look at the revenue, the general fund is slightly lower, partly due to the timing of the real estate tax collections for the township. The bills come out March 1st and the discount period ends April 30th. So depending upon when people make those payments, which is typically in April, it will determine how much you see there. And for 2020, the collections will be in April as opposed to March. The debt service difference is tied to the annual transfer from the general fund, which we have not made. Excuse me, because of the balance in the account from the bond proceeds. And then if you look at the total, there's a difference. The net total, you'll see it has its decreasing from 762, 488 and 18, 327, 145 and 19, and a negative number in 2020. So that's something we should probably keep an eye on to see if any kind of adjustments need to be made in the future. General fund tax revenue, looking at 3 years, pretty stable. Surprisingly, the income tax is higher this year than it has been. Same with the transfer tax so far this year. 2018 was an anomaly with transfer tax. That was a nice chunk of money that we got up front. And the LST was pretty good this year as well. All in all, it's pretty stable. Key receipts during the quarter, we did receive $231,000 in recycling grant money from the state. We got the state liquid fuels grant funding of $662,000, just slightly less than it was in not $679. That's $679,000 in 2019, and received $80,000 in the Green Light Go grant funding. Key expenditures during the quarter, we did transfer $1 million to capital reserve from the general fund. That's made up of $500,000 in the annual funding, which is not the full budget amount, and $500,000 for the public works maintenance facility, which we had planned on putting some of the township money toward that. We spent $35,000 on ag easements, $765,000 in the building renovations and all those, the PW maintenance facility. It's a combination of both of those. I purchased a new police car, which includes the vehicle and the equipment, of $31,000, and $38,000 stormwater mitigation program. There weren't any large road projects so far in the first quarter, obviously, because it's winter time, and construction had stopped because of the virus. And we paid $104,000 for public works equipment from the liquid fuels fund, which most of that was a skid steer, and a smaller amount for the flail mower. And that's all I have. If you have any questions.
Are there any questions for Eric? Okay. Seeing none, thanks, Eric.
Mm-hmm.
Hopefully things will continue running
Yeah.
here the way they look there. So
Thank you.
next item on the agenda is under unfinished business, the award of a contract 2020-C14 tree canopy survey.
I'll ask Dave Modricker to introduce that.
Good evening. I will reference you to a memorandum in your packet dated April 28th. Scott introduced some of this topic in the report. So the township, as you recall, budgeted $25,000 in the 2020 budget to conduct a tree canopy survey. That tree canopy survey was recommended by the Tree Commission to gain an understanding of human and other impacts on the urban forest, measure the impacts over the past 10 years, and develop a plan to best manage this asset into the future. Again, Scott touched on some of the specific tasks that are part of this proposal. So it does cover the geographic boundary of Ferguson Township. The consultant will use imagery. I'm going to use some terms, LiDAR, which is a light detection and ranging imagery. And they will use something also called NAIP imagery. So that's the National Agricultural Imagery Program, aerial imagery. They'll delineate the tree canopy. There are certain specifications, criteria that they will use to do this. Through a combination of those two survey methods and utilizing a geographic information system, they will then also provide a narrative report and be able to quantify the economic benefits of the township's tree canopy. There's a certain tool, it's called iTree Tools. They will use that or a similar equal tree management tool. They'll deliver a summary report. There are some milestones that are notable. They will prepare a draft for review by the Tree Commission in July. We'll provide comments back to the consultant. We would expect they would have a final deliverable in August. And in September, the consultant would present the final report to the Tree Commission and the Board of Supervisors at a regular meeting. So on March 24th, staff received 3 professional service proposals. They were evaluated on 5 criteria: project understanding, experience of firm, qualifications, estimated cost, project time to complete the work. Staff ranked the proposals, conducted a background check of the number 1 candidate. I also, within your packet, do have the proposal. So based on the ranking criteria and the review of the proposals submitted, staff recommends award of a professional services contract to Save a Tree Consulting Group to perform a tree canopy survey in accordance with their proposal for a total price of $15,964.71.
Yeah, thanks, Dave. Any questions for Dave? Laura.
Thank you, Steve. So just let me see if I understand this first before I ask the question. The scope of the survey to assess canopy is all of Ferguson Township.
Correct.
Okay, that's actual data, not extrapolated data.
50 square miles utilizing the 2 different methodologies. The one uses some aerial imagery that's available through a state or national database and agency.
I see, gotcha.
Other is use of something which is more specific to locating the geographic points on the ground. So one is leaf on aerial imagery. The other is a leaf off kind of a point set. And you combine those two to better locate where the trees are. But yes, the entire township would have the canopy surveyed. And then you have the ability to overlay that with other layers like zoning districts or development areas, different geographic criteria to do, certain types of comparisons or analysis or, planning for going forward.
That's great, Dave. And then I think you might have answered my question. I think the answer might be no, but let me ask it. The tools that are being used to assess that canopy, can they provide data on reforestation efforts if we use the same methodology years from now and like now? So do they don't assess any kind of age of tree or growth rate or anything like that.
Well, age of tree, we would pick up in our own asset management tree inventory that we do.
For our trees, but
Yeah, for
not
our
like
trees.
for private areas.
Correct. We
Gotcha.
we only have our, really our street trees surveyed into that inventory. So we could
Right.
give a good classification of diversity, species, size, those types of things for our street trees. But no, we don't have that information. And I don't think this survey captures that kind of detail.
Thanks. I was thinking kind of in two tracks. One is where you're at now, like with things that we can control, our canopy, and we have more data about that. But then the other part is like with that larger survey, seeing how maybe educational intervention or encouraging certain kinds of reforestation programs might affect the canopy. But
Yes.
I guess you kind of could, but it would take a while to see the effect because little seedlings aren't going to really show canopy.
Right. It'll show you where planting opportunities exist. So it may say, here are some sparse areas, and based on either, impervious coverage or not impervious coverage or zoning types, these are potential, planting opportunities. It'll show you over the last 10 years where our canopy has grown and where our canopy has shrunk. So you may see impacts of, for example, development on canopy, and you say, what can we do to, mitigate these impacts if we're concerned about it? And some of that may be intuitive and you may know, but this is more of a quantitative, measurement tool.
It's really interesting, and thank you guys for doing it. I'm looking forward to seeing the results. Thanks.
Yeah.
The other question, percentage.
So just to understand this, there were you mentioned two techniques. One was LiDAR, and that was taken through some sort of drones that flew over, or is it satellite imagery, or what is the source of the first canopy?
So one of the tools that they'll use is the NAIP, and that'll be the foundation for the project. So that's the existing aerial imagery that's currently available.
And we don't know how it was taken, but so is it used to look at the square miles or square feet of canopy, or is it counting the number of trees?
It is, okay, let me try to say a little better, and Scott might clear it up if I'm not making sense here. So it's the National Agriculture Imagery Program. So they use the aerial imagery that's at 1 meter accuracy. So aerial imagery at a 1 meter accuracy says, based on, pixels or whatever it's looking at, that I'm looking at leaves, or I'm looking at impervious area. And so it kind of congregates that, and it can analyze the canopy over a large area and tell you how much of the area you're looking at is leaf on tree canopy.
Okay, so the unit is area that's covered. And then,
Yes.
and then the next one was, how does it get the information about the ground part?
Okay, so that's using light detection and ranging imagery, so LiDAR.
Yeah.
And in some cases, LiDAR is already available. In some cases, people need to acquire it. I believe in this case, they're going to use existing LiDAR of information that's available. It's like a point cloud that goes out and picks up points geographically and brings them back to a central location. So I don't know, think of Google Maps or something.
So
it's a quick way of doing a ground survey, so to speak. So that's what's going to give them more of the geographic attributes as to where this canopy is.
And both of these data sets, they're not creating the data, but they're just pulling the data from to existing databases. So the data is there, they're just getting it. Now I'm trying to figure out what is the work they're going to be doing from there. If the data already exists, well, what are we paying for? I mean, of course, putting it together, is that the $17,000 or whatever it is? Or, what is the work they're going to be doing?
So there's a process of automating the extraction of the tree canopy, preparing the data for analysis, loading the data into object-based image analysis systems where a series of segmentation, classification, and morphology algorithms are used to help map the tree canopy. So they're using these existing databases to prepare and put together the tree canopy product. And they're doing it in consultation with the University of Vermont Spatial Analysis Lab. So they're not coming out in the field and doing physical surveying. They're using information that's out there, extracting it, running it through algorithms, doing whatever it is they need to do to tell us things like, what is the township's existing tree canopy? How much room do we have to plant trees? How has it changed in the last 10 years? And then, like I said, they use some other software to tell us the values of the assets that we have.
Did they, so essentially they're pulling data from two databases and then having a software which is converting that data, identifying objects from that and sort of saying, okay, these are the trees. Did they provide us with any benchmark on how accurate their product and their software is?
Yeah, we had some standards in the RFP that they met or exceeded.
Okay.
I want to say 98%, but I might be off a percent.
That's right. The margin of error is plus or minus 2% in their scope they provided.
Now, I'm telling you all this, having never done a tree canopy survey myself. So some of this is new to me. So I'm answering your questions the best I can, but I haven't been through one of these before myself.
No, I understand that. I roughly understand the technology they're using, but what essentially they're doing is pulling the data and then going through a software which identifies, these are trees, and then doing an automated count. And if that has been validated to be reasonably accurate, then I'm fine. So that's, yeah.
Scott, did you have something to comment on that, or add to what Dave said?
Dave, you had asked if there's something that you'd like me to provide additional information on. There's a couple of things that you had mentioned as far as the source of the LiDAR. That was a question. Also for the accuracy, I can provide additional information from the United States Geological Services and National Oceanographic and Atmospheric Administration. They have a quick thing that I can read off or share on my screen for information on that. And then I also have the Save a Tree. They provided us references for other consulting work that they've done. And the one that I can show is from College Park, Maryland for their city. And you can get a sense of what the product or the report product looks like. So let me know what's of use to the board.
Did you want to see that percentage, or?
I could take it offline if, yeah.
Okay, yeah, if Scott, could you just forward that to percentage then, and, okay.
Percentage, I just wanted to tell you too, the first reference, the client reference that was listed is a friend of mine, a very good friend of mine. So he is an urban forester,
And I would encourage you to email him. He's a great guy. You can use my name.
Sure, thank you.
His name's Morgan Grove.
Okay, thanks.
Page 8 and 9 of their proposal that are in your packet probably answer your questions a little more technically and accurately than I did, but that gets into the various parameters and methodology that you might be interested in.
Yeah, no, thank you.
Okay.
Lisa, did you have something you wanted to ask?
Dave did, I guess, answer it when he said that they won't actually be here doing any field work, if I heard that right, because it looks like the company's based in New York, but the office leading this project is in Virginia. So, and I didn't see if the other proposals were listed in here. I mean, I don't know if they even compared to the one that was presented here, but I was just wondering if there was anybody more regionally located that could provide this service.
I don't think so, but let me tell you where the other proposals were from. I just need to open it up. We did get a proposal from Davy Resource Group and Planet Geo. And I would have to check both these proposals to see which office they're working them out of.
I'm not questioning the capability here, so.
Yeah, Kent, Ohio, I think is where the Davy Resource would come from. And the other one was not local. It would at Geo. I'd have to look and see where they're.
That's too bad, but that does answer my question.
Okay.
Since they won't be coming here and they've actually worked with State College before, but you would think there'd be somebody a little bit closer doing this kind of thing. So guess not.
Yeah, I think most of it is GIS and modeling and basically computer work. So not something that they have to necessarily put boots on the ground for.
Right, because they're not taking the images, they're getting it from these national databases, and that's fine. Yeah.
Any other questions or comments? And does anyone care to make a motion?
I, Laura, move that the Board of Supervisors award the professional services contract to Save a Tree Consulting Group to perform a tree canopy survey in accordance with their proposal for a total price of $15,964.71.
I'll second.
Okay, so motion by Laura, second by Lisa. Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next item on the agenda is under new business, the presentation of the 2019 Township Audit.
Thank you. So I'm going to introduce Christine Zorner and John Compton with the firm Baker Tilly. John's a new face for this group anyway. He's been with the firm for a long time, but you all know, or many of you know, Rick Bear. Rick has given the presentation in years past, but he is now, I guess, fully retired, and he's passed the torch on to John. So, John, I have your presentation here. I'm going to share my screen, and then if you could just give me kind of a verbal cue when you're ready to advance the slide, I can just kind of drop from my end here. Let's see. Thank you.
Okay, well, Eric is queuing that up. Just do a quick sound check. Everyone hear me okay?
Yep.
All right. As Eric did mention, my name is John Compton. I am a partner with Baker Tilly. I work with Ricky Bear for many years. He and I probably worked together for 20 some years at least. And like Rick, my client base consists of what we call public sector work, which are cities, counties, school districts, townships, boroughs, you name it, anything that is governmental in nature. In fact, I've worked on your township in the past in the capacity as what we refer to as either a colleague partner or a concurring partner, someone who kind of sits in the background and serves as a technical resource. So although I may be a new face, I'm not new to Baker Tilly, nor am I new to your account, and it's my pleasure to be here tonight. With me tonight is Christine Zorner. Christine is a senior accountant with our firm. She works and has worked on your township's audit for some time now. And there's some other folks that are involved with this process that aren't with us here tonight, but we'll try to move through this pretty quickly. I will say I've learned more about trees and tree canopies in the past half an hour than I ever thought existed out there. So one question for Eric as to whether or not these trees and their leaf coverage and so forth are going to be considered capital assets on your accounting records. Just kidding. So we will move through this quickly. This is complicated stuff. We look at it, 6-7 days a week, 12 months a year, year in, year out, and it confuses us sometimes. So if there's something that we don't cover in sufficient detail or something you would like us to dig into more detail on, be happy to do that. The audit is complete at this point in time. There are two audit reports that we file for your township. The first is with the Pennsylvania Department of Community and Economic Development, or the DCED. That's a regulatory kind of a summary format financial statement. Technically, that is due April 1st of the following year, but the DCED was kind enough this year to give everyone an extension because of the COVID-19 situation. So that report is done. It's not been filed yet, but we expect to file that shortly. And then, of course, the township prepares what is known as a comprehensive annual financial report, or a CAFR, which is a much more involved report that's prepared in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles. And I think your past practice has been to issue that report in the June timeframe. Technically, that is due to the Government Finance Officers Association by June 30 each year, but GFOA, similar to many other entities out there, has indicated, although they're not going to give a blanket extension to governments who participate in the CAFR program, they would grant an extension to anyone who needs one. But with today being May the 4th, and June 30 is still several weeks off yet, we don't think that we will need an extension. All right, Eric, if you could move along to the next slide here. Make sure I'm looking at the same thing. Okay, I mentioned the audit team. John Taylor is not with us tonight, nor is John Link. We've got three Johns and a Christine on this audit. There are other people who sit behind the scenes kind of in a technical capacity that are involved in your audit in some way, shape, or form. But the core team will consist of Christine and the folks that work with her in the field. All of these folks work within Baker Tilly's public sector group. They do a lot of this type of work. The firm does a lot of this type of work. It really is, governmental accounting is quite different from, say, commercial accounting or not-for-profit accounting. It's something that is unique. So we'll jump right into it here. Eric, if you could keep moving along. There are certain communications that are supposed to take place between the audit firm and either the audit committee or the finance committee or the full, in this case, board of supervisors. And we'll just touch on those quickly. Eric, if you could keep moving there. Okay. Our responsibility as auditors, the end result of this process culminates in what we refer to as an opinion on your financial statements. There are external third-party users of your financial statements, your citizens, the state government, the federal government, and now in 2019, you issued general obligation bonds, so you have investors, if you will, all of whom might be looking for some assurance on your financial statements that someone independent with some level of expertise has looked at this information and at the end of the day expresses an opinion on it. We indicate here that our audit procedures are designed to provide reasonable as opposed to absolute assurance. Most People understand that auditors don't look at every single transaction. We tend to focus on the items that are more material. We focus on items that are higher risk. And, at the end of the day, we feel we have gathered enough evidence to support our opinion on your financial statements. This concept of internal control, you'll hear us use the expression internal control over financial reporting. It's that system of checks and balances, your policies and procedures that you have in place, the way that the township does things on a day-to-day basis. We take that into consideration when we're designing our audit procedures, but this type of audit does not involve the audit firm actually giving an opinion on that system of internal control over financial reporting. So any comments that we might have as it relates to the way that you're doing things is really more of a byproduct of the audit process than it is our sole reason for being there. Now, if there was anything that came to our attention that we felt this board should be aware of, we would report that to you. We describe that communication as an audit finding. There were no findings as it relates to this process in terms of the ways that you're kind of putting this information together and how it culminates in the form of your financial statements. Okay, Eric, let's move along there. Accounting estimates, just want to make sure that everyone understands that our estimates are part of this process. There are certain numbers that are easy to audit, if you will. Your cash in the bank is a number that we can confirm independently. Other numbers are not so hard and fast. A couple of examples I can point out to you would be the estimated useful lives of your property and equipment. Say, for example, there was a police vehicle that was purchased in 2019. That asset would have been capitalized on your books and is being depreciated over its estimated useful life. We evaluate the reasonableness of those estimates. In the case of that cruiser, if it's being depreciated, say, over 3 to 5 years, we would consider that to be reasonable. If it were being depreciated over 1 year or 10 years, we would question that and likely have a discussion with Eric on that. Another example, probably the most significant liability in your balance sheet would be the net pension liability. There are actuarial determinations involved there. How long are your employees and retirees going to live? What are your investments going to do? All of those types of things. So that's also a significant estimate. And again, we as auditors take a look at the reasonableness of the estimates and kind of the variables that factor into those things. Okay, Eric, move along if you would, please. In terms of audit adjustments, we always tell boards or councils that this is kind of a good measure as to how well your internal accounting department is doing. If the audit firm is posting all kind of audit adjustments or, kind of reinventing the wheel when they come in, that's obviously not a good situation. We need to be independent as auditors. The more involved we get in that bookkeeping, the less independent we become, if you will. So the fact that we're telling you here that there were no significant audit adjustments that were proposed as part of this process, that's good for us. It's good for you as township supervisors. If I were sitting in your seat, that would be some indication to me that the information I'm getting from your finance department or your business office is in all likelihood in pretty good shape. The fact that the auditors aren't coming in and kind of restating all of these numbers, that's a positive thing. Okay, really nothing to report with regard to the following. We didn't have any disagreements with management. There were no major issues that were a precondition to our retention. There were no difficulties encountered as part of this process. We do indicate toward the bottom of this slide here that there are certain what we refer to as non-attest services provided. Anytime the auditor does anything beyond, say, giving an opinion on your financial statements, I mentioned the concept of independence a moment ago, to the extent that the auditor gets involved with maintaining depreciation schedules or proposing adjusting journal entries or preparing the financial statements, those types of things are referred to as non-attest services. And in order to make sure that we maintain our independence, we need to assure ourselves that there's someone at the audit client who has what they refer to as the skills, the knowledge, and the expertise to oversee that process. So you've got a solid accounting department there. We certainly feel Eric has the quote unquote skills, knowledge, and expertise to oversee these non-attest services that we provide. It's pretty commonplace for audit firms to maintain depreciation schedules and assist with the preparation of the financial statements and so forth. I would say it's more the norm that we do that, but we just have to make sure that the auditee, in this case, the township, understands that we're doing that and that we have these safeguards in place to make sure that we're not just auditing our own work, if you will. Okay, Eric, real quickly, auditing 101, just want to touch briefly on the type of audit that was done. If you could advance the slide there, Eric, I'd appreciate it. Many different types of audits. There are financial statement audits, compliance audits, performance-based audits, tax audits, which the IRS agents perform, and fraud audits. What we've done in this case is a financial statement audit. There is a compliance element to this. We take a look at the township's compliance with certain laws and regulations and so forth, to the extent that if there was a concern that there was an issue, it could somehow affect your financial statements. We do give that consideration, but at the end of the day, our opinion is on your financial statements. We're not necessarily looking at your performance. Are there better programs you could be operating? Could you be doing, providing your services more efficiently or effectively? That's really what a performance-based audit would be. We're not the IRS. We're not in here auditing for compliance with the Internal Revenue Code, and we're not necessarily looking for fraud. If we do identify fraud as part of this process, we would certainly bring it to your attention. But a fraud audit is something that's a whole other kettle of fish. That type of audit is typically done by a forensic accountant. They are looking at every transaction, and they use special audit techniques and so forth. But what we've done here is a financial statement audit. I think we've, if you could move along there, Eric, I think we've covered all of these required communications. And I'll pause there to see if anyone has any questions before I talk about the opinion on the financial statements.
Okay, does anybody have any questions? I can't see everybody on my screen right now, so just speak up. I'm not hearing any, so.
Can you call me Dave, John?
Yes, sir.
Can you call me Dave instead of Eric?
Okay.
Thanks.
I thought Eric was running.
No, that's all right. You were on a roll. I didn't want to interrupt you when you were moving through. I've been called.
Okay.
Don't worry about that.
Yes, sorry.
That's quite all right.
Slide 11, we're talking about the type of opinion that we're issuing on the township's financial statements. There are basically three types of opinions an auditor can issue on a set of financial statements. The best type, if you will, is what is referred to as an unmodified opinion. That means without exception, in the auditor's professional opinion, the financial statements are fairly presented in accordance with either generally accepted accounting principles, which will be your CAFR, or in the case of the DCED report, these regulatory requirements as put forth by the second-class township code. So that unmodified opinion is as good as it gets in this setting. Unfortunately, an audit's not really a situation to pat the auditee on the back. It's kind of a pass-fail sort of thing. And our pass, if you will, is our unmodified opinion on the financial statements. I will say in this day and age, as complex as these accounting rules are, that's quite an accomplishment to get to a point where an audit firm can give an unmodified opinion on your financial statement. So that should not be taken lightly. That's a real accomplishment. All right, Dave, let's move along to, let's see, we'll go to slide 13. Just quickly to talk about how one would go about analyzing a set of governmental financial statements. There's no real single measure of operation such as earnings per share that you can compare with other townships or other governments to get a sense as to how you're faring. What we look at as auditors, what external analysts would look at would be your budgetary integrity. Are you raising the funds and expending them as per your budget plan? And also your general fund balance is a benchmark that's oftentimes used to evaluate the financial position or the financial wherewithal of the organization. So let's move on to slide 14. In slide 14, we're looking at your general fund budgeted revenues and actual revenues and your general fund budgeted expenditures and actual expenditures. And you can see in both cases, we beat the budget. Your actual revenues were greater than what were budgeted, and your actual expenditures were less than what was budgeted. Collectively, those two scenarios resulted in a positive general fund results from operations, or a net income, if you will. I hesitate to use that commercial term, net income, but your excess revenues over expenditures in your general fund was about $503,000. So we added to our general fund balance in 2019 by $503,000. Touch on a couple of the reasons for that. Your tax revenues were about $387,000 more than what was anticipated. There was miscellaneous income that was $159,000 more than what was anticipated. On the expenditure side, your public safety actual expenditures were about $166,000 less than what we had budgeted. And there was quite a bit in general fund transfers out to other funds for operating purposes. And those transfers out were about $263,000 less than what had been budgeted. So again, in most budget categories, revenues or expenses, you beat the budget, if you will. Okay, moving along, slide 15, we're talking about your general fund balance. Just to put that in perspective, what we're talking about, fund balance is the difference between the assets and the liabilities within your general fund. So cash is one type of asset. There's also receivables in there, taxes receivable, prepaid expenses, due from other governments, all of which collectively make up your assets. On the liability side of the ledger, there are things such as accounts payable, accrued expenses, deposits. I believe in your general fund, there's a fairly significant curb deposit to the tune of about $700,000. So we net the liabilities against the assets, and what's left over is your general fund balance. That balance at December 31st, 2019 was about $8.5 million. And you'll see there, we say that that's approximately 259 days of the spending, which is deemed healthy. Just to talk to what we're referring to there. If we were to take a typical general fund budget for any given year and divide it by 365 days, we come up with a cost per day. We divide that into your general fund balance to get an idea as to how long, if all of the township's revenues stopped coming in as of a certain point in time, how long you could live off of that fund balance before it went into a deficit position. So 259 days is robust. There's no other way to look at it. I mentioned the Government Finance Officers Association earlier this evening. Their kind of rule of thumb for what a general purpose government like a township should maintain in its general fund balance is about 3 months worth of operating expenses. So we have this indicated in days here, but if we convert that to months, you're at about 8.5 months worth of operating expenditures in your general fund balance. So really solid financial position for your general fund. That was as of December 31st, 2019. Things are getting more difficult for everyone. State and local government is no exception here in 2020. So it was a good position to be in. You're kind of well situated to deal with this COVID-19 situation, whatever that may bring for state and local governments. It seems as if, as far as the federal stimulus is concerned, there have been a lot of beneficiaries of that, whether it be commercial employers, not-for-profits. The one sector that seems to have been left out of this thus far are state and local governments. So we'll see what that means. But certainly as of December 31st, 2019, the township was in a good situation financially. Okay, I think in the interest of time, I'm going to move this along here. We'll take a look at some historical information. Dave, if you wouldn't mind fast forwarding to slide 18. Slide 18, we're showing general fund revenues by source over the past 5 years, and you can see that's super consistent year to year. That's typically what we find in government. It's unless there's a significant tax increase or significant grant dollars coming in from the state or federal government, you don't tend to see a lot of variation year to year as far as the mix is concerned. And that was the case for Ferguson over the past 5 years. If we look at that same information in a pie chart on slide 19, they're virtually mirror images of one another, 2019 on the left and 2018 on the right-hand side. And you can see the composition there of those revenues year to year. Expenditures, it's the same story. Looking on slide 20, you can see we compare the numbers year to year. It's really comparable. In fact, I can't tell much of a difference whatsoever looking at the numbers 2019 versus 2018 in this format. If we could move ahead to slide 23, David, this is another measure of how robust your general fund balance is. This is over the past 5 years. And even though it seems like it's decreasing there, what we're comparing is how many times over the general fund could pay its current liabilities with its current assets. And you can see that number at December 31st, 2019 is slightly over 5. So again, if you think of it in terms of what you owed out of your general fund, you could pay that 5 times over before there was a need to seek financing elsewhere. Finally, the last item I'll mention is on slide 24. A lot of entities will take a look at their debt to equity ratio, and prior to 2019, the township had no debt, no long-term debt to speak of. And you can see that's added in on, it's the light green or the lime colored bar graph for 2019. That's just under $7 million. I believe that general obligation bond was about $6,850,000. There was a premium paid on that of about $112,000. So collectively, that's just under $7 million. And, there's no real measure for state and local governments as far as what is a good ratio to have there. In a commercial setting, anywhere between 30.3 to 0.6 would be a reasonable setting. In Pennsylvania, with state and local governments, there is a borrowing-based certificate that the government needs to prepare. I can assure you Ferguson is well within that limitation that DCED sets for townships in terms of its borrowing. So I think looking at the clock, I've been going about 20 minutes. I don't want to take up all of your time. If we take a look on slide 25, I'll just wrap this up. General fund balance is sound. We had no material weaknesses or what we would refer to as significant deficiencies that we're reporting to the township as it relates to your system of internal control over financial reporting. And the plan is to complete the CAFR and submit that to GFOA by June 30. I think we're in really good shape as far as that is concerned. We've got some work yet to do with Eric, but I think everything is on track. So that's a lot in 20 minutes. Any questions that we can answer for you? Or Christine, did I miss anything that you were hoping to cover?
No, I think you covered everything.
I have a question.
Yes.
Yeah, so you had insurances and other around slide 20 or 19. What is the other that goes in with the insurance?
To take a look at that. Christine, do you?
Yeah, it's like the additional, so it's like your insurance and then it's like your health costs, like your workers' comp. And I'm trying to think.
So it's more or less premiums for various things.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And in around slide 18, I think you had the breakdown of like we were spending about 35 or 40, between 35 and 40% on public safety, which was our highest, and so on. How does that, do we have numbers for similar governments? And I was trying to understand how that compares with what sort of the other people are doing. Is there a benchmark there?
You know, within local government, townships, cities, boroughs, the public safety line item, which is typically a collection of dozens and dozens, if not hundreds of individual accounts, it can vary significantly. Some townships have no police department. You know, they rely on state police protection. Others have a sizable police department. Other entities might have some semblance of a paid fire department or paid drivers that function out of a volunteer fire department. So it's a pretty wide variable in terms of what makes up that line item. As far as your township and considering what you have, what all comprises that number, I think it's, I would say it's in line with what we've seen in similar other operations. The item that sets Ferguson apart from what we typically find here in Pennsylvania amongst our township group of clients is you're progressive. You've got money in the bank. You know, you're in a good financial position. Even your pension, we didn't get into your pension funds here tonight, but your police pension fund, although it is underfunded, I believe it's 86% funded, which is pretty darn good. Believe me, there are cities, townships, boroughs whose defined benefit pension plans are significantly underfunded. And by the time they budget for their MMO, which is affected by the level to which those plans are underfunded, that's a big chunk of their budget for the year. So you know, back to the original question, it varies entity by entity, but I think the one thing that strikes us as we look at Ferguson is the operation is pretty sound financially. And you know, we would not say that if that were not the case. That's
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Any other questions?
Just a final comment. When the board receives the CAFR, the Comprehensive Annual Financial Report, I encourage you all to spend some time reading through it. It's a very comprehensive document, and it is a very detailed picture of where we stand financially. So that should be forthcoming, as John indicated earlier, sometime in the month of June. We'll receive it. I'll send it out to board members, and you're encouraged to reach out to either Eric or myself if you have any questions, or even if you just want to spend an hour or so diving into it, and we can point out where some of the real critical and useful information. It's all really good, frankly, but some specific references and tables that are a really nice snapshot of where we're at, with at least with respect to the previous fiscal year. So look forward to that.
Thank you, guys.
Sorry.
Thank you, David. Thank you, Eric. Thank you, supervisors. We appreciate it. We're here if you need us. Please don't hesitate to call or email or let us know if there's anything further we can do for you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good night, everyone.
And our action on this is just to accept.
Yes.
So I take a motion to accept it.
I'll move that the Board of Supervisors accept the 2019 Township Audit as presented by Baker Tilly. This is Lisa.
Percentage second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you,
very much.
everyone.
Thank you.
Good night.
Thank you.
Night.
And at this point, I'm going to call for a 5-minute break. We'll rejoin at 8:45.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
which was the same for Rick Bear, but the ground, they did a pretty thorough job.
Yeah, audits were always interesting when I was working at chemical company, because I was an analytical chemist, and they'd draw something out of a tank to make sure that a 10,000 gallon tank had what it was supposed to be. We'd have to determine what it is. So you get this jar with just a number on it and have to figure out what it is. It has to match what the label on the tank is.
Take a little sip. Is it like the
Yeah, right.
Cola test, the blind taste test study?
Well, that's the audit of the distillery, but okay, looks like we're all back. So I will call the meeting back to order. We'll go to the next item, which is a proclamation, 2020 National Public Works Week.
Thank you. I'll introduce this. A copy of the proclamation is provided with your agenda this evening. The proclamation officially designates the week of May 17th to be National Public Works Week in Ferguson Township. The theme this year, provided by the American Public Works Association, is the rhythm of public works, challenging municipalities and their residents to think about their communities as a symphony of essential services, working in concert to create a great place to live. Information on National Public Works Week can be found on the American Public Works Association webpage at npww.apwa.net.
And do we have any comments from our conductor?
I think it's a wonderful theme. Some of it's lost in the hecticness of everything else we're doing these days. So I did not order the poster this year and put it up in the lobby for all the residents to see, but it's great that we can talk about it here and celebrate it via Zoom remotely.
Do we have a motion?
Yeah, I move that the Board of Supervisors proclaim the week of May 17th to May 23rd to be the 2020 National Public Works Week in Ferguson Township.
Second.
Yeah, I have a motion from Resenjit, second from Patty. Any discussion, comments? Just our thanks to Public Works.
Public Works thanks you.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Unopposed? Motion carries. Next item is the award of contract 2020-C7A fuel.
Bids were open publicly for the fuel contract Monday, April 27th. A number of staff were present as indicated in my memorandum, as well as one vendor. The fuel bid was advertised in the Center Daily Times and it was sent out to potential bidders. This year we received 2 fuel bids. Nittany Oil, $28,702.50. Stuck Enterprises, doing business as Jacobs Petroleum, $27,913.50. Bids were within the current budget amount of $110,610. Actual cost will depend on 2 things: our actual consumption of gas and diesel and the escalating wholesale price index. I recommend the Board of Supervisors award contract 2020-C7A fuel to Stuck Enterprises, doing business as Jacobs Petroleum, in accordance with their bid in the amount of $27,913.50.
Just on the last point, where the actual cost, of course, depends upon the consumption, but is the rate fixed, or, I wanted to find out if nothing is fixed, then what does the contract mean? And can
Sure.
we put in a low amount to get in and then increase the cost?
Right. So the way contractors are supposed to bid it per our specifications is they submit a bid and then they have to provide a unit price from their supplier, whether it's a Opus, bench rack, or whatever their supplier, whatever they're using. And so they submit that with their bid. So in this case, for example, if we take 89 octane, the price that Stuck paid on the date certain that I put in the bid, because it changes every day, but whatever date it was, say April 16th, their price that they are substantiating for 89 octane was 0.5737. So a little over 57 cents a gallon. Then every shipment, they mark it up with a fixed price of 0.011 for an underground storage tank fee, a fixed price of 0.17 per gallon. So our unit price in this case on that date was a little over 75 cents a gallon. So what's fixed is the underground storage tank fee and their fixed price markup of 17 cents. But what changes is the price that they're paying on that day of shipment from their supplier. And that's what they're certifying, and that's the backup they have to send us with each shipment.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions or? If there are none, I take a motion.
So I move that the Board of Supervisors award contract 2020-C7A fuel to Stuck Enterprises DBA Jacobs Petroleum. In accordance with their bid in the amount of $27,913.50, subject to the contractor submitting a COVID-19 safety plan for the job acceptable to the township prior to starting work.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion from Vicente, second from Laura. Are there any questions or comments? Okay, so all in favor? Aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. Next item is the award of contract 2020-C7C, asphalt and aggregate.
Bids were open publicly for the aggregate and asphalt contract at 10:30 a.m. on April 27th. A number of staff were present. Again, the contract was advertised in the Center Daily Times and provided to potential bidders. 4 bids were received for aggregate. I apologize, but I don't think my summary of the bid tab is in your packet. But if you do have those questions, I think I can open it up on a share screen here. Aggregate is bid delivered to the township. Bidders were Hanson Aggregate, Glen O'Hawbaker, Woodland Equipment, and New Enterprise. 3 bids were received for asphalt materials, again summarized on a bid tabulation. Asphalt material is bid freight on board, so our trucks drive to the asphalt plant and pick it up. So because of that, I factor in a cost of trucking per ton that's estimated. Bidders were HRI, Glen O'Hawbaker, New Enterprise. So based on my review, I recommend the Board of Supervisors award items 1, 2, 3, and 4, which are all aggregate items, to Hanson Aggregate in the amount of $10,075, and items 5, 6, 7, 8, which are the asphalt items, to HRI in the amount of $24,520, all under contract 2020 C7C aggregate and asphalt.
Okay, any questions for Dave on this contract? Yeah, I had a question. Obviously, this amount will depend on the amount we use, but is this a fixed amount or does it vary like the fuel with their supplier costs? Or?
Okay, so good question. On this, the unit pricing remains the same. It won't vary. We will issue a contract, but we will pay based on what we actually order and receive.
Okay.
And we will manage that all within the budget, and we, keep track of those items and know where we're at.
Right. Okay. Any other questions or comments? Okay. Anyone care to make a motion?
I, Laura, move that the Board of Supervisors award contract 2020 C7C asphalt and aggregate items 1, 2, 3, and 4 aggregate to Hanson Aggregate in the amount of $10,075 and items 5, 6, 7, and 8 asphalt to HRI in the amount of $24,520, subject to the contractors submitting a COVID-19 safety plan for the job acceptable to the township prior to starting work.
Second.
Okay, the motion from Laura, second from Brsenjit. I bet that's the first time you've said aggregate 3 times in one sentence.
In aggregate.
Any other questions or comments? All in favor? Aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dave. Next item is staff and committee reports. Under the COG committee reports, the executive committee didn't meet, but I did want to comment. Laura had raised a question last meeting about the, well, actually, we did meet, yes, since the last meeting, about the sustainability plan and the 2 jobs that were involved in that. That is essentially was an item coming before the executive committee to discuss what staff should be doing as the next steps toward the 2021 budget. There are proposals for 2 new jobs included, and essentially staff was asking what steps should they be taking at this point. The committee decided to refer it to the municipalities for comment before we make a decision on that. So at our next meeting, we will be getting information from COG staff and our board will be asked to make any comments so that at the next executive committee, we can take action to essentially define to staff what we would like them to do in preparation for the program plan. So that will be coming up. The background information will be coming in the next 2 weeks. Other than that, we essentially did routine business. The executive committee has pretty much decided that if something doesn't require action before we start having our regular meetings of the full general forum, unless it's just an item of routine business, we won't be taking action on things. So at this point, we are referring things like the sustainability to the municipalities. Otherwise, we're trying to hold off as much as possible on any decisions, but we don't just have the 6 of us making decisions. So and that was really about it for the executive committee. Laura.
Thank you for that follow-up, Steve. I have another question that's related to that, as we're starting up again, our processes. So tomorrow, I think it was, I'm not sure of the day actually, but soon the HR committee is meeting. And they're going to talk about I don't really understand the item, a peer-to-peer grant opportunity that could evolve into there's a staff position or something like that. My question is, will the HR committee be making a recommendation to, if they make a recommendation to executive committee, or is it now are we starting up our general forum process again? Like, will that come to forum?
I don't think we're going to have a general forum meeting this month, But again, this will be something that would probably be for the 2021 budget. So normally it goes to HR, then it goes to finance, then executive, then general forum. So unless it was something that required action rather quickly to get a grant or something, the executive committee would put that off to next month.
Okay, thanks,
General
Steve.
forum.
Thanks.
And yeah, as Laura mentioned, the committees will be starting to meet by Zoom now. So if you haven't gotten an invitation to your next committee meeting, you should be getting one soon, which I'll use as a segue to Lisa, since Transportation Land Use met today.
We did meet today. And it went fine other than my part of it. My internet connection has been horrible all day. So I dropped out of the call twice. So I apologize. It's been steady so far tonight. So, but if you lose me, that's what happened. The agenda was in the packet. So I won't go over it in detail, but I'll just mention a couple of big things we talked about. We got an update on the housing affordability study that CRPA has been conducting. They had sent out a number of surveys to landowners and rental property managers in the area to survey what they have, how many units they own, general pricing guidelines, availability, vacancy, what they do for marketing. It was a pretty extensive survey. And so they had some initial feedback on that, and also pointed out where they've had a hard time getting information. A lot of the larger properties did not want to share vacancy information or specific pricing information. So those were a couple of big pieces of the study that were not able to be captured so well. So the question was really, what do we do with moving forward with this study at this point, knowing that we have a lot of unknowns with students and the fall semester and new construction coming online. So what we decided and discussed at the committee today was none of us really wanted to totally shelve the study because it is important, and seemingly everything eventually will come back to normal, and we'll still have the housing affordability issues we had prior to all of this. So since there is some momentum there, not lose it, but acknowledge that we need to probably kind of reassess some things. So they had planned to have a get together with some different property owners. So we suggested maybe they do that virtually and try to get a little bit more information on the housing stock that is here, and what landlords and managers are thinking these days. Somebody suggested seeing if there is a way for us to get some wholesale data from some of the larger property owners. So is there a place where the property owners kind of report their vacancy and pricing data that we aren't aware of? So is anybody requiring these people to file this information somewhere? So we're gonna, staff's gonna dig a little bit and see if they can find that. And then one other suggestion was to kind of take a minute right now, and especially if students aren't here in person in the fall, to maybe look at some of these properties and see where the affordability, where there is potential for transition to affordable units. So if we have a real surplus of housing in the fall, how can maybe some nonprofits or some different people who are interested in being involved in affordable housing may take advantage of the situation? So the numbers we saw in the preliminary findings show that there is a surplus of housing available based on student enrollment numbers. So there is just a feeling of not wanting to miss an opportunity if maybe there is an opportunity here. So that I'll leave that at that, and then we'll see what happens with that. And the second thing we talked about was the CHIP, the Comprehensive Plan Implementation Program for 2021-22. that is the steps that CRPA uses to implement all of this, the goals and objectives in the comprehensive plan. They're suggesting that they kind of scale back a little bit on the CHIP and focus on 3 primary tasks. That was completion of the Act 537 plan special studies that they have in the queue right now from UAJA. One of those being the Scott Road pump station, which would affect us. The second is the initiation of the comprehensive plan update. That'll be completed in 2023. So that will need to get started next year. And then implementation of the climate action and adaptation plan. So that was a large portion of the focus of CRPA. And we agreed that sounded practical at this point. They're just unsure of their staffing resources and what's going to happen, and maybe what other special projects they'll need to take on. And again, we just have a lot of unknowns right now. So we'll have the joint meeting with CRPC in October. So we'll be able to kind of reassess at that point too. But for now, that seemed like a practical way to move forward for them. And that was about it.
Thank you. Any questions for Lisa? Okay, seeing none, we will go to, see, we had the Climate Action and Adaptation Technical Advisor Group. Is there any report other than what's in the agenda?
No, I didn't attend that, so the agenda is just included as a matter.
Okay, we'll move to the manager's report.
Thank you. My report is brief, just 2 items and then 1 verbal update. There's a thank you letter from the State College Area Meals on Wheels program expressing appreciation for the contribution made by the Board of Supervisors to assist in their response to the COVID-19 pandemic. There was a pretty lengthy meeting that staff participated in last week with officials from Penn State University outlining their plans to commence a Center County Community Cohort Study, which is being commissioned by the Penn State Data for Action Group. I've included the slides of my report for you all to have an opportunity to review and maybe get a little bit of background on what they're proposing. But essentially, it's a 2-phased approach. The first being a comprehensive a snowball sampling, meaning they're just going to get as many people as they can to participate in it countywide. And it'll be a short measure, just really looking at getting a sense of what folks were doing in response to the COVID-19 pandemic. From that, they hope to gather the second phase sample size, which ideally will be more reflective of the population of Center County and also ideally be a statistically valid measure. And that would include some biological components. So actually administration of testing for COVID-19, testing for antibodies for those that may have had it and were asymptomatic or mildly symptomatic. And the intent would be for the university to draw some conclusions with respect to Center County's response efforts and their effectiveness in minimizing or mitigating the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. They've engaged the municipalities and the county government to largely to disseminate the information relative to the first phase of the study. I think they're just enlisting all the assistance that they can think of to help encourage folks to participate. So we don't have much detail as of just yet about what that's going to entail, but I think regionally we'll offer to, promote it to the degree that we can through our media and social media outlets, webpage materials, et cetera, to try to encourage people to participate in that study. Lastly, just a quick verbal update on the status of the Suburban Park Development Project. Centrise Martin, the assistant to the manager, completed the submission for the grant application to the Department of Conservation and Natural Resources. So now we just kind of play the waiting game. Typically, they don't announce awards until sometime in the fall. Given the nature of the pandemic and its impact on state revenue projections, I would think that's probably going to be a late 2020 announcement, if not early 2021. So it'll be several months before we know whether that that grant application is successful or not. Otherwise, I'll answer any questions.
Any questions for Dave? Seeing none, we'll go to the Public Works Director's report.
Thank you, Steve. Dave touched on some of these elements as his COVID-19 report that he gave at the beginning. But I do want to point out that we have resumed brush and leaf collection because I know residents are appreciative of that. And there will be a second round this month. So we started today and we will have another round or complete round of the township starting Monday, May 18th. There's other work activities that are also going on. Dave also mentioned that the crew's working in shifts and observing our COVID-19 safety protocol. In my report, I kind of mentioned some other activities of the arborists, custodians, mechanics, engineering, GIS, all of which are either mostly working in the office or doing some remote work and a combination of field work. Work continues at the Public Works Maintenance Facility. Today was the first concrete pour. Work for the next 3 weeks includes site excavation, preparing the subsurface for the building pad, excavating for footers, tying rebar, building rebar cages, forms, pouring concrete, and site utility work for stormwater, and also excavation of the BMP, best management practice, one of the smaller stormwater basins. We will continue to track impacts of the COVID-19 work suspension on the project. Currently, or at least at the time I wrote this report, there were 130 work days remaining. Staff has met with the consultant regarding progress on the stormwater fee study phase 2. We have another meeting this week and we'll bring the manager and the finance director into those discussions. But we do need to start talking about some of the more of the details of the any potential fee structure, credit structure, and how we may move ahead with this project in the current climate in terms of meeting with the Stormwater Advisory Committee and public engagement. So there's things that we need to think about in terms of gathering sizes and what we can do remotely and how we engage the public these days. And the real big decision is going to be not that we're going to talk about tonight, but are we going to hold off until we can get 100 or 200 people in the same room, or are we going to figure out how to move forward using these new platforms that we have for public involvement and engagement? That's that, and finalizing the fee and credit structure with the committee are two big items that we'll be talking about this week. I just have an update on some of the other projects in my report, some of which we already touched on tonight. That's all I have.
Okay, any questions for Dave? Laura?
Thank you. I'm not sure if this is a question for Dave or Jenna or maybe both of you. In our review of the Harner Farm Land Development Plan for Sheets, I asked a question about tree islands in the parking lot. And if I understood the consultant correctly, he pointed to like the head of the parking space and said that he had put the tree islands instead of between the parking spaces, like at the top of the parking spaces. And also I think that lot, the orientation of it and where the parking spaces were, if I remember correctly, if he did put the tree islands at the top of the parking spaces, they would be in the east and in the north. And so I was just wondering, so obviously in our ordinance, we don't have any kind of constraints about where parking islands are placed so that they accomplish their task of reducing the heat island effect. Because if we allow them placed like above there and at the north and east, it doesn't really shade very much. So I guess my question is, do we not care about that return, that ecological return on those tree islands in our ordinance? And if we don't, can we?
So while Jen is unmuting her mic, I think all I can really contribute is I remember your discussion during the last meeting, Laura.
Yeah.
And I don't know if there's more than 10 stalls in a row. And that's, I think, when the island idea kicks in.
Yeah, every 10 stalls. And that
In
I
a
would have to
row?
double check on how many stalls. Yeah, in a row. So I would need to look at that plan and see if there are more than 10 stalls in a row.
No, I don't think there were. I think there was probably
Yeah.
10. I think you're probably,
Yeah.
okay. So he actually was just saying there's trees over here. They weren't really these tree islands that are mandated by our ordinance, probably.
I think so.
Okay.
Yeah, I would say this is something that when we get looking at the reports from the tree commission later on, there would be a question to raise at that time, what zoning things could be done,
Right.
in terms of not only what we require, but why we require it. I think
Right.
that's a good question.
And are we achieving our goal?
Right, yeah.
Right.
Or do we know what our goals are?
Right. Okay, thank you for indulging me.
Mhm.
Oh, no problem. I did have one question for Dave also. I know we were planning this year to be doing some planting in the Haymarket Basin. It was of specific wildflower types. Has that been affected by everything going on with the staffing, or?
It has. So there was a project, and it was in cooperation with U.S. Fish and Wildlife and maybe perhaps some other names that their agencies or affiliates go by. And some of that has been stalled, as well as our tree planting contract in the spring, as nurseries couldn't dig and contractors weren't really supposed to be working. Now, in Haymarket, in the basin, I believe they are either seedlings or bare roots, so I don't think it's the digging the balled and burlapped issue. But one of the things that hopefully isn't holding us up, which is not COVID-19 related, is that basin, there is a maintenance agreement through, I believe it's Johnson Farm Associates. And so the township engineer revised or prepared an agreement so that they were on board with what we were doing because of the maintenance element. And it went through legal review, and I think it's just now been forwarded to that group of people for their review. So we're waiting for them to concur it, sign it, get it back. And then I have to check with Lance and see where we're at in terms of being able to pick that project back up, because I was certainly looking forward to it.
Right.
We addressed what were the engineering concerns, because I had to have some discussions with the township engineer to address concerns that they had. But yes, it did get delayed, and hopefully it can get picked up and move forward again.
Okay, thanks. Any other questions for Dave?
Yeah, I guess
Ginger.
I'll ask a follow-up question on the tree canopy thing. And Scott sent me some information, but during the break, I was quickly looking up at things. I did skim through it earlier on, but it seems what they're saying is that they are going to be using the LiDAR data from 2006, and they will use the LiDAR data from 2019 if it is available. And my understanding is that perhaps, do we really need it in that much of a hurry? Or should we just ask them to wait until the LiDAR data for 2019 is available and then have a better comparison?
We could have that discussion during our kickoff meeting with them before they get started on the work and make a decision if it makes sense to wait a little while.
Okay.
When this, initially was talked about, some of the incentive may have been, is there any way we can get this done in advance of working on our tree preservation ordinance or in concert with it? So I think they're both, moving on their own paths with their own merit. So, maybe that tie has been broken. So, we could certainly look into the merits of wait until the 2019 LiDAR is available, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I tried to look it up, and their references are broken. A couple of places their references are broken, and I didn't know which LiDAR. USGS has several LiDAR data sets. I didn't know which one they were really talking about, and yeah, if you can find more about that. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you. Any other questions for Dave?
I do have a question.
Scott.
Is it so I guess it's okay for folks outside of the board to be asking questions at this point?
Sure.
Yeah. So that's also a question for the board. This was a tasking. The tree preservation ordinance was a tasking given by the board. When was that? In 2017, Dave?
It's
a couple of years back, plus or minus. And so if the board is okay with us waiting for, say, a year, a half a year, that would be good information to know in making the decision of which one we want to go with. In some ways, that could help inform or justify some of the language that is put into the incentives and the ordinance to have that data available to us. So any thoughts that the board has would be useful.
Okay. Well, I think as far as that, if Dave's going to be in touch with the consultant, we could certainly determine, if there was some reason to think that there would be better information available by waiting, that would be something to bring to the board. And we have it budgeted, but that's certain,
Yeah, I'll look into the 2019 LiDAR, and the tree preservation ordinance probably has enough steps ahead of it that we have time to consider that.
Okay. Anything else? In that case, we'll go to Jenna for the Planning and Zoning Director's report.
So Planning Commission, their meeting for April 27th was canceled. We traded with Tree Commission, so we have to share our Zoom account. We'll be meeting May 11th, and we have our conditional use for the one lot in the Orchard View subdivision for the stormwater portion of that. I'd say most of all of our conferences, mine and the zoning officers conferences, have been canceled, but a lot of them have been seamlessly transitioning virtually. So I was at my national planning conference last week for 3 days, just watching videos live, which is interesting. And they did, I guess, networking opportunities, different topics on housing. So that was actually interesting. Based off of their questions at the end of the conference, you could tell they're leaning to, would you rather do this next year to save money and not travel? Did you get everything out of this that you would if you were there? So we'll see what happens. And then zoning hearing board, they'll be meeting May 26th right now. It could be pushed to June, but we're still waiting to hear about that.
Any questions for Jenna? Okay, seeing none. Go to, are there any communications to the board that should be shared with the whole board? And the calendar item, the only thing we have is brush collection beginning, and Dave mentioned that already, so. Anything else? I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
We are adjourned. Bye.